change PowerPoint. Everyone done? Yep. Cameras down. No, one more. 2 more. Done? Done. Excellent. Where's my mouse? Yeah. Couldn't find my mouse there. So here we go. Next up, we have Maribel Hidalgo Urbaneja from the University of Glasgow, who's going to be talking about defining digital narratives in art museums and how we can assess the scholarly value of narrative online resources. Maribel.
So thank you very much for the opportunity of being here. I'm very glad to be able to present some of the results of my doctoral research that I'm doing here at the University of Glasgow. And as the title of my research says, I'm looking at digital narratives. Traditionally, art museums have told stories to the public through exhibitions and through the publications of those exhibitions, the catalogs. But in the 20-15 years, museums have started to use technologies to improve the experiences on site with interactive screens, apps, or the pen we've seen yesterday. But in my case, because I'm talking about online resources, I'm focusing on the material the museum puts online, so users can use that before the visit, after the visit, or without ever being in the museum. I'm interested in the variety of online resources that are out there, so online publications, online exhibitions, websites, microsites, interactive features, and so on. I think it's important to know that not all online resources have a narrative scope. There are some exceptions, but for instance, the general collection database privileges research and information retrieval over narrative, and ultimately users are responsible of the narrative that they are getting out of them. But the resources I'm looking at have a stronger curatorial input and an overarching narrative. So museums are kind of expanding on the stories that can be found in the general website, and they talk about a group of artworks, an artistic school, an artist retrospective, a theme, etc. The main characteristic of those resources is that they provide a very rich layer of interpretation and enhanced features, and usually the website, it's the interface, it's a bit more experimental than in the general website, have better images, more multimediality, more interactivity, and so on. As you all may know, the majority of these online resources have a stronger education and general public focus. And just recently, with the emergence of digital humanities, museums and art historians have started to use, to realize the potential of digital technologies to understand and to address complex art historical matters, sometimes in collaboration with museums, but sometimes not. And in this content, my research focus and my research question is about figuring out the added value and encourage discussion about how museums are, how digital media is kind of improving the way our stories are being told, and how different this is from what has been previously done. When I'm saying that I'm defining digital narratives, it's because I'm trying to find the main characteristics in those online resources, and I'm trying to find a way to say this is what is going on, what is happening, this is why this is a digital narrative. My methodology employs narratology, as you might expect, which is a well-recognized theoretical framework in visual arts, museum studies, media theory, etc. But since in museums practice and museum studies, it is required to add a layer of empirical research, I'm complementing the narrative theory with data from museum professionals involved in the development of digital narratives, who can be either people working in digital departments, in publications departments, or curators. But on the other hand, I'm collecting data from our historians as users of those online resources. This slide contains my case studies. My process selecting them was based on how innovative they are and how they represent the best practices in the field. All of them are quite big museums, and unfortunately or fortunately, those are the museums with the right resources and infrastructure to develop those narratives or those online resources. And also, as you might see, there is a geographical spread on them. So I have cases from the United States, from Spain, and from the United Kingdom, and this is connected to having travel resources or having previous professional connections, but I'm always keeping in mind that they are the best practices in the field. In this moment, I just finished the data collection, and what I'm going to present today is just related to our historians. So I have the data from museums, and if someone wants to ask me what I've got, I'm happy to speak about that, but today I'm going to focus just on this. So I have around 20 participants, 20 are historians. I collected the data through Thinking Aloud protocol and some interviews pre and after the Thinking Aloud protocol. Each art historian has tested 2 websites, one general public website and one scholarly one. I was interested also in what art historians can take from general public websites and not only scholarly websites. And with this number of participants, I was able to use each website, each case study around 5-6 times. And although this seems like a quite low number of times, it was enough to reach a data saturation point, as our historians will say the same. And this is also related to practices in usability, is also the required number of times to do usability testing. Participants are in every stage of their careers. So I have PhDs, and I have also honorary or retired art historians. Initially, when I started to recruit participants, I wanted to have art historians who are practitioners of digital humanities, of digital art history, and people who are not that familiar with online research and computational methods. But I found particularly difficult to engage those who are not very enthusiastic with the use of technology. So I'm aware that the data it's going to be represented. It's from a minority of art historians who engage with digital technologies. Also, geographically, mostly art historians who are have interviewed are based either in Glasgow or New York City. And because all the resources, even the resources from Spanish museums, were in English, it's difficult to get participants who are from other countries and to get their feedback. About Thinking Aloud protocol, it's a widely used, very straightforward method, and I didn't have any experience practicing or doing Thinking Aloud protocol with participants, and I found really useful sometimes to be myself a participant in some sort of user testing panels, and you can kind of understand what the best practices in industry are, and not just in research. So for today's presentation, I'm going to, I have structured the data in a way that kind of reflects the main narrative aspects in those online resources that can be sometimes different from fiction narratives or storytelling. And the first point for me will be authorship, not surprisingly. Art historians, again, not surprisingly, pay a lot of attention to which museum is providing the material to which, if this is a well-recognized museum or not. They are also very critical with the information they are getting. So when they were browsing the websites, they will tell me, I know this is from this museum, but I will be also interested in knowing which other institutions are saying, or what other people are saying. They value when museums provide links to other resources, even when the resources are not digitized. So even if they provide bibliography or archival references, this is also important. And some users also pointed out the possibility of link open data to improve this institutional authorship and the transparency of institutions. At the same time, curators pay also attention to curators who wrote, who developed the resource. This is not always the case, and this is what I'm talking about, invisible authorship. A few art historians find difficult to cite online resources. They are also aware about how content production happens in the museum, how this is a collaborative effort in which not only curators or assistant curators are participating, but also volunteers or interns. And I wonder if the digital could provide some sort of tool to improve this aspect of content production. My next point will be related to readership, spectatorship, because we are looking at images and not only reading text. I'm using this term, entrance narrative, which is a museum studies term, which can be understood as the visitor or user internal storyline that guides and informs the visit to the museum. In the case of art historians, of course, their historical backgrounds highly determines what they get from the museum. I tried to test projects that were related to the field of specialization of art historian, but that wasn't always the case. So when I provided something not related or a bit more general, I had sometimes art historians telling me, you know, I'm not an expert in this subject, so I cannot give you proper feedback about what I think about this content. It was also interesting seeing how some art historians, like this, there was this PhD student doing research on Byzantine art, and she was looking at an Italian Trecento catalog, but she was mostly interested in the articles in which they were talking about the influence of Byzantine art in Trecento. Or another PhD student who is Asian, I was doing research about Asian art, and how in this website with artworks from all over the world, she was just looking at Asian art. So I think it's important don't take for granted that art historians, because they are art historians, they are going to be interested in any kind of content, that we also have to trigger their attention and to find strategies to make the content relevant to them, especially in the digital world where the attention span is so short. And this entrance narrative is also determined by their curatorial expertise, by their teaching expertise, and their digital literacy. So if they know about crowdsourcing because they participate in a crowdsourcing project, they will suggest that crowdsourcing will be a solution for this or that online resource. The next aspect of readership I'm addressing is close viewing and distant viewing. And the digital humanities is very popular to talk about how technologies are facilitating distant reading and looking at massive amounts of data from afar and get an overview of the story and recognize patterns and things that are very difficult to see if you are just focusing on the details. But I think in the case I think in the case of our history, close reading, which would be like the traditional way of reading, it is also a lot of benefits in the digital world. So most of the resources I use, so I'm trying to summarize. So most of the resources I have used make use of high-resolution images, captions, details, and so on. Some art historians said that this is a very good way to focus on the detail, and the digital really helps them to decontextualize the artwork and not being distracted by other artworks, by surrounding, and but at the same time it can help them to make connections with other images if you are looking from the same interface. However, they pointed out issues, for instance, not being able to recognize cropped up images in websites, are also not knowing the actual dimensions of the artwork and not having any references to understand how big or how small this is. The next slide is related to distant reading. I just have the opportunity to use just one website using distant reading, and I have to say our historians were very enthusiastic about this idea. Probably this is the highest rated website that I was using with them, but I'm going to move very quickly through this to finish with the idea of the structure, how this is related to time and space. It's again related to distant reading, to graphs and diagrams, and how you can make sense of complex stories. But I think it's very interesting to also to understand the way the website itself is structured. And I found the Maribel Ryan idea about tree structures as a very effective way to explain this. When I was testing the websites, I could see how our historians would start. From the index, they will choose a link, they will go back to this link, they will choose another link. I don't know how this is influenced by the artificiality of that situation. They will also have many problems going back and forth and not knowing how to go back to the point to which they started. And then when I use kind of parallax scrolling down websites, some of them found this much more easier to use because they wouldn't get lost in too many pages. At the same time, they were aware that websites with many pages were much more complex than scrolling down websites. When I'm talking also about the time required to use the resource, not only the time or the timelines used in the resource. I noticed that general public websites require more time to be used than scholarly websites. And scholarly websites, just because they have to be searched and our historians have to find information, they they have more facilities to make them feel at their ease, and some of them will complain about how general public websites, they have too many videos, too much interactivity, and so on. Yeah, there I have, well, this idea about how graphic design, graphic elements, and design interface really determines the way we use the website, and how this makes sense of the narrative of the story. When something is not well designed, when the graphic elements are confusing, our historians could miss a big part of the story, a big part of the content. And I think it's important to think about usability not only as something that makes things more easy to browse or more beautiful, but also something that influences the discourse, the narrative. And to conclude, those are my questions. So to which extent digital media offer our museums new ways to approach our history, how this is different from the physical and how this is different from the print, if we are really fully critical and aware of how digital is changing the way we read and look at art. How can we use an analysis, a more, let's say, qualitative analysis as this analysis to complement quantitative data, and regarding our historians, knowing where these suggestions leads, also keeping in mind that, if they are digital art history practitioners, which are the trends in digital art history, and how can museums collaborate with them and learn about what they are doing to understand what they are asking from us. So, yeah, this will be.